Oh, well, I'll start it now. Okay, well, anyway, so the psychological impacts of having had the stroke and what it did to me. I mean, at a moment, in one day, I lost my career. I lost my hobbies. I lost my independence. I lost my mobility. I lost a whole bunch of things. And the question becomes, now what do I do? Now what do I do? Who am I now? You know, am I still the Scott Lucado that I was 48 hours ago? Who am I now? And I'll tell you, I don't have the answer to that question after nearly 5 years. I have had a lot of stuff to try and deal with, and I try and deal with it the best that I can. Some things I can still do. They're not as easy, but I can still do them. For example, one of the things I did in my profession was professional narration. I was once the voice of Alaska Medicaid fiscal agent, believe it or not. So, yeah, the residual checks from that are really huge, as you can imagine. While nobody's going to hire me to do professional narration now, since my speech isn't quite back to where it should be, I do have a friend who lives in Minneapolis. She's 86 years old and still very active, very energetic, but she's legally blind. And she likes to take classes online, but she can't read the course material. And the way it's set up, a text reader, automatic one, doesn't help because it just reads the words top to bottom. And if it's a bulleted list or something, it makes no sense to her. So what I do is I read the slides to her. I'll describe them and read the text and say it's blocked like this and there's an arrow pointing here and that. And so I do that for her. So that's kind of nice, and she appreciates it. And it helps me feel useful, you know, because, you know, I'm not going to be washing cars and mowing lawns for a living at this point. So, but again, you know, I have this item here where I say my ongoing attitude is still that of gratitude. I mean, I'm still so grateful for so many things. I get emotional about this, so you have to excuse me. But number one, you know, I think in terms of what I can do and the progress I have made, not what I have, the distance I have yet to go, because it's a long way. It's a long way. And you look at it and you go, God, why even bother? You know, I mean, what's the point? You know, I may never ever type with two hands again, which I'll tell you, it frustrates the living hell out of me. I used to type 85 words a minute. And now if I can do 25, it's a good day. And I think so much faster than I can type. You know, and say, oh, why don't you try speech to text? Well, yeah, I tried that. And, you know, again, I used to be a professional narrator. It can't understand me. You know, put in this thing, I gave my name, Scott. It came up as Path. What? What? Yeah, it's, you know, what? So anyway, it's the kind of thing. But anyway, you know, like I say, I stay grateful for what I can do. Our circumstances are really not so bad. I think, you know, when I was in the hospital initially, they're like, well, before we can send you home, we need to know, are you going to be safe in your house? Do you have stairs? Do you have this and that? Well, Irene and I have lived in the same little house forever, and it's one story. So there's a couple of minor steps to get in the doors, but that's it. You know, there are nothing really dangerous. Of the two bathrooms, one has a walk-in shower, so I can get in there. You know, and it's really not so bad. You know, we own the house outright. We don't have a house payment. We don't have car payments. Our cars are paid off. You know, we have hospital bills. Shot my IRA to hell, but we you know, we've got other resources. We're okay. So I'm certainly glad of that. And one of the things that I try and keep in mind as I go throughout this is, I think worldwide, are there people who would trade places with me? You know, and you know, and I think, you know, if you went to somebody and said, okay, here's the deal, you'll have no debt, a happy marriage to a spouse who absolutely adores you, you have fiscal resources, you're able to get around, you can drive a car, maybe not far because you get tired, but you know, you have all these things. Not as many friends as you thought you had, but the ones you have are still very good, very helpful. That's my friend Demi there in the back. Came all the way from Forney, right?
Carrollton.
Yeah. Yeah, a long way. Way that way. Way that way. Yeah, just to be here. We haven't seen each other in a long time.
Yeah.
We used to work together.
We talk, well, I talk a lot. God gives the best advice, and he is
So.
with patients of the saints, for sure.
Well, thank you. I'll have your payment ready when you. No. But anyway, and so and it's like, okay, well, how many people would take that deal, And here's what it'll cost you. You won't be able to use one arm. Oh, by the way, I'm a native left-hander, so losing my right hand was not as bad as it could have been because, being left-handed anyway, that, when they say you're a lucky guy, that's one of the ways in which I'm lucky. So I didn't have to learn how to write all over again. My writing is so terrible, people think I'm learning to write, but it's always been like that, really, I swear. But seriously, I realize that there are a lot of people who take that deal all day long, all day long. I hear about people who sit at home at night terrified that the phone's going to ring and somebody's going to demand money, or they don't want to go home because they know it means having a fight with their spouse or whatever. I don't have those problems, So, when I met my wife, it's a long story. I won't get into it too far, but when I first saw her, I used to have a job. I used to make ID cards for the University of Illinois in Chicago. So I photographed every single incoming freshman, every single one. 5,000 new students every year, at least. I saw them all. And when she came in front of my camera, it took me 16 years to convince. Sorry, I don't know how I got down that path. I'm sorry. Okay, well, anyway, so let's talk about something.
I'll definitely trade places with you, no problem.
I know, Don't you wish you had somebody who,
A million%.
That's right, I know who hung the moon. Okay, anyway, so talking about my recovery. I'm sorry.
Are we all friends? I might go grab.
If I could tell you the full story of how we got together, you wouldn't believe it. So, but when I met her, I said, someday I'm going to marry that girl. And by God, someday I did. Okay, well, anyway.
I've had to listen to how amazing Irene, I get it, by the way. I can't wait until I take all the lunch with her. I have been hearing about the beautiful, amazing, incredible woman you are. How long has it been?
Well, it was, yeah. Yeah, so, I know.
And that's just the 15 years I hear about it.
That's right. So, okay. So anyway, getting back on topic, I apologize for the digression and getting choked up. I'm an intensely emotional guy, in case you can't tell. So let's talk a little bit about what recovery really means for me. I know you might want to hear, well, what's a typical day like for you? Well, I don't have a typical day. When people go to bed at night and they get up in the morning, I don't do that. I try to go to bed at night, and sometimes I sleep a couple hours. Sometimes I don't sleep at all, so I get up and I watch TV for a while, and I try and do some stretching, something so I can relax enough to go back to sleep. But sometimes, like, my arm hurts so much I just can't sleep. And so because of that, my energy level varies from poor to non-existent. So on days when I get a fair amount of rest, if I sleep 2 hours, then I'm up for 2, and then I sleep for 2, and then I'm up for 1, and then I sleep for 3. I don't feel too bad. And so I'll say, I'll go for a drive today because Irene will be at work or something. And I'll say, yeah, I'll go through the drive-through at Burger King today. So that'll be my big outing, So I'll go to Burger King. Although it is kind of funny, I have to tell you this one little story that as my recovery progressed, I finally got to the point where I could get out of the house on my own. I practiced driving around the neighborhood a little bit, just here and there. And one of the hardest things for me to do was get my shoes on. So I couldn't put my shoes on by myself. But Irene helped me get my shoes on. And I said, okay, I'm going out. And she said, okay, have fun. So got in the car, drove to this little burger place near our house that we've been going for years, by myself. Get out of the car, walk in the door. And I'm very clumsy when I walk. I was before the stroke. I'm not terribly graceful. As it turns out, I didn't know this when I was a kid, but I actually have a birth defect in my legs, that my lower leg bones are fused. So I've always been kind of awkward. But anyway, so I go up to the door and I pull it open. I'm clanging and banging my cane through the door, and I go up to the counter, and and everybody in the place is looking at me like, oh, this poor, pathetic man, And all I could think of is, if you people only knew, I'm out on my own, for the first time in 2.5 years. Yay. So anyway, it was really great. I was thrilled. But I just thought you could never tell a situation by looking at it. To them, I was this ruin of a human being. And to me, it felt like a phoenix, that I had risen from the ashes, and I wasn't exactly soaring in the skies, but I was out on my own. Oh my God. It was wonderful. It was wonderful. So one of the challenges that I face is just staying motivated. Like I said, certain things that I've tried to recover, and I've repeated the motion thousands and thousands and thousands of times and made no progress. How do you stay motivated? After you've done it 20,000 times, how do you do it the 20,001st? And I don't know. I want to get better for her. So, I'm sorry. Okay, so anyway, I'm amazed. I'm sorry. This is so much that has been pent up for so long. Okay, so anyway, so things do get easier, but nothing gets easy. When I first got home from the hospital, I couldn't take a shower by myself. Irene had to stand there and watch me to make sure I didn't get hurt, that I didn't fall. I couldn't dry myself with a towel. All these things I couldn't do. I can do them now without thinking about it. It's really amazing. In fact, there was one time, this is going back about 1.5 years, I guess. And Irene was at work, and I made myself some lunch, and I went into my home office. And I was sitting there eating my lunch, and I said, how did I get in the room? The door was closed. I had my sandwich and a drink in this hand. How did I get in the room? And I realized that I'd used my right hand to open the door and to turn the light on in there without thinking about it. And I thought, I don't believe it. I sat there, I was stunned, I sat and I cried for 15 minutes. I couldn't believe it. So, and now there are things I can do with my right hand that I didn't think I'd ever do again. It's really amazing. So, okay, well, anyway, I want to talk about, we talked about that, the whole thing about measuring progress. How do you measure progress? And it's really hard. Are you familiar with the Brunstrom scale of stroke recovery? You've heard of it? Okay, it's a 7-step thing that talks about regaining ability at certain level and certain detail. And I tried to measure myself against that, and it was incredibly frustrating because I thought, that's not, it's not just a physical thing. My recovery is so different, and I realized that it was kind of sorting itself into 3 different categories. The first I called survival mode. What are those things I need just to get through the day? Can I go to the bathroom by myself? You want to talk about things I hated when I was in the hospital? Needing help, and I hated that. I hated that so much. I'm an old-fashioned guy, from my generation. That stuff was private and personal. You didn't. I hate it. Okay, but the ability to fix myself something to eat, to get in and out of bed, to get dressed and undressed, to do these things, it was hard. I couldn't do them at first. And so I said, okay, so those are kind of some survival skills. And then the next phase I realized was into what I call sustainment. Can I sustain my life over a week or a month or a year? Can I go to the store and buy groceries? Can I drive a car? Can I hold a conversation with another human being? Can I read a book? Because I couldn't read a book initially. It was funny, I had to read kids' books for a while because I could see words and I knew what they meant, but I couldn't put them into a sentence and have it make sense. So I was reading children's books for a while because I've always been an avid reader. I've always been an avid reader and a very fast reader too, so this was really scary for me. So, I've read War and Peace 14 times. It's my favorite book. Anyway, so getting that stuff back is part of sustaining my life. And then there's going beyond that, and that's becoming a useful, productive member of society again. And that's what I call succeeding. So I have the surviving, the sustaining, and the succeeding. And I think it's actually a pretty good model for recovery, and I haven't seen anything like it. And something I would like to do is develop this idea a little bit more to see if there's a way I could promulgate it to help other people survive, and sustain their lives and succeed. So if anybody would like to work with me on that, I would love to hear from you. So, my email address is on the bottom of the sheet. So I'm serious. I'm serious. I think this, is a wonderful thing, because if you only look at it in terms of the physical reality, if I would only look at my recovery in terms of how much dexterity I have in my right hand, prospects are fairly bleak. But that doesn't mean I will never again be a useful contributing member of society, does it? I mean, I certainly hope not. One example being the narrations I do for my friend who's blind, and certain other things. Being here. To be honest, a year ago, I could not have done this. I could not have done this. I wouldn't have the ability to concentrate long enough to do this. Even this little outline, I could have started it. I don't think I could have finished it. I don't think I could have talked to this group for more than about 10 minutes before I was so exhausted that I would be helpless.
And now
So,
you're making us cry multiple times.
I know. I'm sorry about that. So, But it's, let's face it. We're emotional beings, and this is a very emotional journey for me. Just to the very first time. I can't tell you that because there's no way I can get through it. But the very first time I was able to do things again. The most minute things. Just hold something in my right hand so that I can pull with my left hand. Like get the last slice of bread out of a bag. Try doing that one-handed. It's incredibly frustrating because the bag comes with you, right? And some of the things I've had to learn how to do. I get a lot of nasal congestion, so I use those breathe right strips. Try putting one of those on using one hand. I've learned how to do it, but it took some time. So anyway, so I work with that model of surviving, sustaining, and succeeding, and I don't think of it as a hierarchy. To me, these are multiple dimensions of recovery. So I have sort of a dimension of survival recovery and a dimension of sustainment recovery and a dimension of succeeding recovery. So, and that idea came to me. Irina and I were talking about computer programming. For many years, I made my living as a programmer of instructional materials, and we're talking about Fortran language for some reason. I said, yeah, Fortran's really good for doing like if you need an 8-dimensional array of data. And it's like, what are 8 dimensions of data? Does anybody know? Okay, let's say you have a complex of buildings. There's 10 buildings. That's one dimension, buildings 1 through 10. Each building has 10 floors. That's the second dimension. Each floor has 20 rooms. That's the third dimension. Each room has 8 desks. That's another dimension. Each desk has 6 drawers. All right? So that's how you get into these multiple dimensions. So I was just telling her that, boy, that's a really exciting story to hear, I'm sure, yeah. But I began to think, in terms of dimensions, it's like, well, the survive, sustain, succeed model is kind of dimensional rather than hierarchical. And I thought, well, what about the dimension of time then, And I thought, no, I think time is really irrelevant to the discussion because you can't, you can measure it, but it's not really a useful metric. Did it take me a month to learn how to walk again or a year? It doesn't matter as long as I learn, right? So anyway, that's the kind of things my brain goes to now that I hadn't been able to think of for quite a while. So, by the way, when I was in the hospital, I was thinking, why is it that hospitals provide, from a patient's perspective, the experience is a continuum, right? It's like I'm there, somebody comes to feed me, somebody comes to give me therapy, but it's ongoing, it's all day. Somebody comes to empty the trash, somebody comes, it's a continuum. And yet the way hospitals are managed, it's a hierarchy, right? And who's at the top? Right? Doctors. Right? Why? From my perspective as a patient, who was in charge of the hospital? Nurses. Mm-hmm. Who did I see the most often? Who gave me the most care? Who paid the closest attention to me? Who responded to my needs? It wasn't doctors. It was nurses. So if I was going to start a hospital, I'd put nurses in charge. And I'm not just patronizing you guys. So, seriously. So, anyway, that's the way my mind works. If, I don't know. So,
I agree with that.
Oh, I bet they do too,
My dad and I felt the same way. Of course, the doctors would
It's the nurses. Yeah.
Knows the patient.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, my first professional job, I was coordinator of computer-based education for Rush Medical Center in Chicago. And because of that, I met a lot of doctoral students, med students, nursing students, and allied health students. The nursing students were the best looking. But, you know, the thing is, I learned a lot about their profession and what they did. And, you know, I met some medical students who, frankly, should never be allowed near a living human being. You know, I met some people who really weren't very smart. I met some nursing students who were there to snag a doc. And, I met some allied health people who were extremely dedicated. For them, for a lot of them, you know, that was the route out of poverty, was to learn to do something, you know, that didn't require a whole lot of, okay, well, I'm getting kind of far afield again. I apologize for that. But anyway, you know, it gave me a real different view of the whole healthcare field. You know, I learned how vital nurses are in my experience having this stroke, because I really saw it firsthand. So if I had more time, I could go into some of these things, but I know we're probably running out. And the next thing I have on my list here is talking about living in Shunland. And Shunland is a place that is divided into two neighborhoods. And one of the neighborhoods has areas like they list here, like frustration and isolation, depression, apprehension, my favorite, sleep deprivation, you know. But on the other side of Shunland, there is areas like determination, adaptation, and et cetera, et cetera. You kind of get the idea. So where do I live in Shunland? Where I pick, where I decide. So, okay, I have one more thing I wanted to do. Do you want to play a little game? Yeah? So can you? Okay. Now, along my way to recovery, I had to learn how to make do with certain things, and to help me recover. And I'm going to hold up an item and see if you can tell what I use it for. I have this thing. It's a little knobby ball. What do you think I do with this?
Is it a back scratcher?
That's not bad. That's not bad. Well, anybody else?
Roll out your muscles.
I use this in my hand, my affected hand, because it gives stimulation to it. Those little knobs give me some sensation. And it's amazing that just having that in there, because my hand naturally wants to close, that's why I just about always have a piece of pool noodle. You know, pool noodles are like one of the greatest things on the planet. I mean, I didn't realize, you know, 1,000,001 uses. So anyway, I'll spend some time like this, and it'll help stimulate the nerves of my hand. And afterwards, you know, I can feel my brain going, what the hell was that? You know, but that's good because it's important and it helps me. Okay, let's see. Here's another one. This is a black sock. You're not going to get this one. What do you think I use a black sock for? To match my black shoes, right? No. It's this is for, I should explain. I have sleep apnea, and I use a CPAP machine. Ever since the stroke, the only way I can sleep is flat on my back. I used to sleep on my side, but I can't do that anymore. Well, because I sleep at all hours of the day and night, I sleep during daylight a lot. And since I only have one hand to get my mask on and off, I used to put something over my eyes and then put the mask on. Well, I can't do that anymore. So what I do is I put the mask on and I put the black sock over the mask, and it blocks the light. So, well, pretty smart, huh? Not bad for a guy who's had a stroke. All right, an old white handkerchief.
Drop that for the ladies to come by and pick it up.
No, I have the quad cane for that, because one of the things I've learned is that quad canes are an old lady magnet. When I first started using a quad cane, Irene will back me up on this, I had women coming up to me saying, "That's a great cane you have there." I swear. Is it true?
It's true.
It's true. You know, of course, then they'd go on to say, "I need to get one for my husband," you know, but it's...
They would. Like a drag.
You know.
It was the weirdest thing.
Yeah, you know, and they'd walk off, and I'd say to Irene, I still got it. Okay, so anyway, one of the things I tried to do is do some exercise to try and reactivate the nerves to my arm. And so I decided, I started by taking a ball and tossing it from one hand and see if I'd catch it in the other. Well, of course I can't. So the ball would roll away, right? Well, you can imagine the fun of that lasted about as long as you'd expect, like milliseconds, right? So I said, no, I got to find something else. So I had a rectangular piece of memory foam and tried that. They'd roll too far away, and I thought, well, okay. All right, wise guy. So I finally took an old handkerchief or an old piece of cloth, and I use this, and I toss it from one hand to the other. And if it falls, it doesn't go anywhere. So I can pick it up again and do it. So anyway, all right, let's see, what else have I got? Somewhere in here well, I thought I had. But I have a poker chip. It fell to the bottom of my bag. I can't find it now. Anyway, I use a poker chip to try and maneuver things, to pick things up with my affected hand. So when you go to physical therapy, they try and pick up a coin, and I'm like, what, with my tongue? Because my hand is not going to do that. I mean, let's face it. So, but a poker chip is actually a little bit better. So the idea is, with all these little things, and I've other stuff at home, like I bought a baseball bat. Obviously I'm not going to be playing baseball, but it really works to help me turn my wrists, and also I can put it in my right hand and it will stretch, with the long end out this way, it'll stretch my wrist muscles this way. So when I was a kid, I wanted to play baseball like every kid did, and I really wanted to have a Louisville Slugger baseball bat. They're the best bats, and I could not afford one when I was a kid. So now that I'm in my 60s, now I have a Louisville Slugger baseball bat. Thank you very much. So I won't be hitting baseballs with it anytime soon. But hey, you never know. You never know. So let's see. That's about all I have. I wanted to close with this story, but there's no way I can tell it without crying, so I'm not even going to try. But trust me, it would make you cry. If you cried at the other stuff, we'd have a flood going out of this room. So it's a very corny story, but guess who it's a no. I tell you what. No, I tell you what. Send me an email and I'll write it out and send it to you. Okay. So.
Scott, I know that that there's probably a lot of questions. I have a couple myself. We do have a few students who might need to just kind of in the course of the next few months trickle out to get their next client.
Okay.
But I think I speak for all of us just to say your determination, your just desire to push forward is really inspirational.
Oh, thank you.
And I wish that every person who's had a stroke was able to hear you speak, because really dwelling on what's preserved rather than what's lost is just that's definitely a choice, and it's definitely I'm sure a daily choice that you have to make. So thank you for that. A question for you.
Yes.
Where was the area of your stroke?
I had what's called a lacunar ischemic stroke. That there is some section of my brain, they tell me right about here, that is no longer there.
And what were your speech and language deficits that you experienced? You mentioned reading, and you mentioned that it was that your language was relatively preserved, that you have some speech difficulties that make it to where you're not quite where you were prior to your stroke.
Right.
What were some of those specific deficits
Okay.
you experienced early on?
Yeah, initially the real problem was that the facial muscles on my whole right side and my tongue were essentially not really there. People tell me that they don't see any signs of a facial droop anymore. I see them, but initially I couldn't. And in fact, the first speech therapist I talked to assessed me in the hospital, and she came and ran me through a bunch of vocabulary drills and stuff. And then she said, okay, one of the tests she said was, okay, say buttercup over and over. And I looked at her and I said, buttercup over and over. So, and then Irene's like, he's always been like that. So, but that was a real problem. And my tongue just, felt like I'd had Novocaine shot in it on one side. that was an incredibly strange sensation. You know, my whole mouth felt that. Well, my whole face felt that way. You know, kissing my wife felt really weird. It's like I could feel her lips on this side, but no, this side. What is that? What's that weird sense? So, other than that, that was really about it. And in fact, when I went to the rehab hospital and they assessed me in terms of needing speech therapy, after 5 minutes, the therapist said, "You're fine. You'll be fine." So.
What about the reading?
The reading comprehension, that really didn't. I wasn't really aware of it initially. You know, because had all this other stuff going on, so I didn't know what was happening. I didn't really have the opportunity to read very much. It wasn't until, you know, because it's like my brain was in such a jumble, and so that, you know, I didn't. All right, thanks for being here. I really appreciate it. And that was, and coming back from the comprehension, though, that I didn't receive any therapy for it because they didn't really assess me for that. You know, the vocabulary tests they gave me are like, okay, name all the animals you can beginning with the letter B. You know, and I'm okay, bumblebee, brontosaurus, beaver. You know, so anyway, I went through the list, you know, in 60 seconds, and I gave her all this stuff, and I said, "How'd you do?" And she said, "Well, you came up with whatever it was, 22 words, something." And I said, "Okay, what's the average?" She said, 11. I said, "Well, okay."
Do you feel like it was more poor attention leading to difficulty comprehending what you were reading? Like it was harder to focus your attention?
Yeah, I think that was really probably it. And you know, and already, I mean, I spent how many nights in 2 different hospitals? You know, how much sleep did I get? Like none.
Yeah.
You know, I can remember saying, "God, you charge all this money for a bed, and I can't even sleep in it." You know.
I wonder if your brain is switched because you're left-handed, and for you to not have profound language deficit. Wonder. They did a functional MRI of you. It would just be interesting to see.
I don't know. No one's ever suggested that. So I don't know. And I think they were amazed to find that I had a brain at all, let alone it's like how it's organized, you know. But that's a very good question. You know, here's a complication. I'm an identical twin.
Interesting.
So,
Are you mirror twins?
Pretty much. I mean.
Is he right-handed?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. And he and I are polar opposites in every imaginable way. So we haven't even spoken in 25 years. That's how opposite we are.
Wow.
So, yeah, very weird. So, yeah, you can cut his brain open and see. You know, I don't think he's using. I don't think he's using it very much. So, you know, have at it. I'll just keep mine. Thanks. Other questions? I'm really enjoying this, by the way. I could go on all day. I mean, like a lot of people who spend way too much time alone, you give them an opportunity to talk, they will not shut up. So, you know.
Well, it's very interesting because a lot of our clients here are on the severe end and have trouble communicating and talking, so they're not able to tell us, you know, they're in pain, or they didn't sleep well the night before. So it's good to hear what it's like to recover from a stroke.
Yeah. Yes, and you know, like I said, they told me how lucky I was initially, and I am so fortunate that I can communicate. I mean, it's, you know, I mean, a big part of my profession was I did a lot of writing, you know, and it's so important for me to use words, and to lose that, to not be able to tell my wife I love her would, oh God, horrible. You know, and in this stroke support group that I belong to, there is a man in there. He had a stroke. Not a lot of physical stuff. He moves really well. He can barely speak. You know, and I feel so sorry for him. I know my second night in the hospital, they brought in a woman who'd had a stroke, and she not only couldn't speak, she couldn't stop vocalizing. You know, at the top of her lungs, just you know, and they moved her to another facility shortly thereafter. They couldn't do anything for her. So yes, I mean, that's an area in which I'm extremely fortunate. So, and now I feel fortunate and grateful to have somebody to talk to.
Is your pain on one side?
Oh no, I
It's all
wish.
over.
It's all over. And I hurt all over. In fact, it was kind of odd that when I first got home and I'm walking around the house banging into stuff, I would like hurt my left hand, and my left hand wouldn't hurt. My right foot would hurt, or my right hand would hurt, or my left foot would hurt. And it took years to sort that out. So, and another problem is that I'm in so much pain all the time that I can get bruises or cuts, and I don't feel it because, my pain meter is pegged all the time. So everyone will say, why do you have blood on your hand? I'm like, oh. Or where'd you get that cut? Oh. So, occupational hazard of being a stroke patient, I don't know. So, other questions?
I had
Yes.
a question for Irene, if it was okay, about what it was like from a caregiver's perspective.
Well, of course it was difficult, I never really tried to think of him as disabled. That was part of it, because it's like, okay, you better get going, but it was hard, and I would just go through it, and I never really thought about it, so, even today, I can tell you some of the things we had to do, because it's just, I got through it, but it was difficult. There were times, and, trying to work, trying to take care of him and things, that he would need, but he got self-sufficient very, very quickly, and as he said, we were both lucky that it wasn't worse, because that would have been much more difficult. But, I don't know if that, it is different. I don't know what else to say. It's just difficult. But you also have to have a mindset, just, in my mindset, he's going to recover. It's 5 years later. It's not quite where I wanted to be. And those are the realities, that you have to come to terms with. But he still could talk. He could do a lot of things, that you still have that relationship. It's not different as if, like you were saying, the extremes that you guys see here, that would be extremely difficult to do as a caretaker, but he's back to himself, aside from not being able to move on the right side. Can we do the same things we did before? We traveled a lot, did a lot of things that way. We still travel, but we don't do much once we're there.
That's
he
different.
stays home. I'll go out and do whatever I want to do. So that's difficult to come to terms with those things. Those are probably the more difficult things to do, is to come to terms with that, because you're more limited in what you can do.
Did you feel supported by the therapists and services that he was receiving? Did they include you in therapy, or do you wish that they had involved you in a different way?
No, I was very happy with the therapy that he got. Because it was really up to him. He had to make that decision. He's the one who had to do it. The hardest part was getting him there. Because as he was saying, he wasn't sleeping. So, I'd come home from work, it'd be 2 o'clock, we'd get to be there by 3 o'clock. Getting him motivated to do that. He wanted to go, but he was so exhausted. And to get him out the door, and actually there was very difficult. That was probably one of the most difficult things to do. And he could only do so much when he was there at therapy because he was so exhausted from just being, not sleeping. That was probably the worst thing, just not sleeping. He was only sleeping about 45 minutes. He'd lie down, 45 minutes, he'd be up, 45 minutes, so that was hard. So.
And one thing that impacted my physical therapy in terms of recovery was COVID.
Oh yeah, that's what we stopped.
The place I was going here locally was really great, and I had a wonderful therapist. But they had, they introduced a mask mandate, and I went once wearing a mask, and my therapist said, "Don't come back." She said, I can see you're struggling. You can't breathe through this mask. This is not helping you. This is not helping you." So. And, but by then I'd been given so many exercises and stuff. It's really just a matter of doing it, And the other thing one of my therapists said is, "Oh, by the way, if you gain some ability, you better practice it or you'll lose it again," just like that. And I'm like, oh, great. So as I regain more ability, there's more things I have to keep doing so I don't lose them. And, there are some things I've lost and regained because I don't do them all the time, As Irene said, I don't always feel like exercising. And I know now I seem like this really friendly, chatty guy, tells stories and that, but when I'm having a bad day, you do not want to be around me. You do not. So, the dragon wakes up, and the dragon is not nice. So, but Irene puts up with that, so, or she goes away. And so far she's come back every time. So, I keep saying, if you got in the car and left and didn't come back, I would understand. But as she said, we were talking about it because I feel bad. I feel bad that I can't do the things I used to do, and we can't do the things we used to do. And she said, you're still my husband. Yeah, you can't move, but you're still my husband. You sound like him, and you look like him, and you act like him, and, that sort of thing.
Plenty of jokes.
Yeah. So, other questions?
Thank you so
Okay.
much, Scott.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you all. Really. You guys have made my day.
Full of TCU
Oh.
goodies for y'all.
Thank you.
Did you appropriately using some tchotchkes there? So
Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming.
Oh.
Scott.
Oh, thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Really
You know.
great.
And y'all feel free to email him.
That's right.
And watch his videos. They're really good.
Yes, and
Oh.
the YouTube videos as well.